The mahogany conference table gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Henderson and Associates, the law firm that had handled my grandmother's affairs for 30 years. I sat in the leather chair, my hands folded in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. Across from me sat my cousin Jessica, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the armrest, her designer purse positioned strategically on the tabula, silent announcement of the wealth she'd married into. Grandma Rose had passed 3 weeks earlier, and the grief still felt like a stone in my chest. She'd raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Jessica, on the other hand, had barely visited in the last decade, always too busy with her social calendar or her husband's business ventures. "Thank you both for coming," Mr. Henderson said, adjusting his glasses as he opened a manila folder. His expression was professionally neutral, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of concern that made my stomach tighten. Jessica leaned forward, her cherry-red lips curving into what she probably thought was a sympathetic smile. "This must be so hard for you, Emma. Losing Grandma Rose like that." The insincerity dripped from every word. This wasn't a story of 2 grieving granddaughters. This was something else entirely. A drama that was about to unfold in ways I couldn't yet imagine. "Let's proceed," Mr. Henderson said, clearing his throat. Rose Mitchell's last will, dated March 15, 2024. I watched his lips move as he read through the legal jargon, my mind drifting to memories of Grandma Rose in her garden, teaching me how to prune roses, how to make her famous peach cobbler, how to stand up for myself even when the world seemed determined to knock me down. Those were the stories I wanted to remember, the tales of a woman who'd survived the Depression, buried 2 husbands, and built a small fortune through sheer determination and smart investments. To my granddaughter, Emma Catherine Mitchell, Mr. Henderson continued, I leave my primary residence at 487 Maple Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $2.3 million. And wait. Jessica's voice cut through the air like a knife. What about me? Mr. Henderson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ms. Hartley, if you'll allow me to finish, this is ridiculous. Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm her granddaughter, too. Emma's been manipulating her for years, living in that house, rent-free, probably poisoning her mind against me. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Jessica, that's not to Jessica Marie Hartley. Mr. Henderson's voice rose slightly, regaining control of the room. Rose Mitchell leaves her collection of vintage jewelry, estimated value of $50,000, and a cash bequest of $100,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the calculation happening behind Jessica's eyes. The math that told her she was getting less than 5% of Grandma Rose's estate. This family drama was about to become something much worse, a full-blown family revenge scenario that would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty, justice, and blood ties. This isn't over, Jessica hissed, grabbing her purse. Grandma Rose wasn't in her right mind. Everyone knows she was getting senile. Emma took advantage of a sick old woman, and I'm going to prove it. Ms. Hartley, Mr. Henderson said firmly, I evaluated Mrs. Mitchell's mental competency myself just 2 months ago. She was completely of sound mind. But Jessica was already at the door, her heels clicking violently against the floor. She turned back, and the look she gave me was pure venom. You always were a little parasite, Emma. Living off her, pretending to care. Well, I have lawyers too. Good ones. And they're going to tear this wall apart. The door slammed behind her, and I sat frozen. My grandmother's legacy suddenly feeling less like a gift and more like a curse. This revenge story was just beginning, and I had no idea how dark it would get. Mr. Henderson sighed deeply, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. Emma, I need to be honest with you. Your grandmother anticipated this reaction. In fact, she left something else, a letter she wanted you to read in private. She said you'd need it when the time came. He slid a cream-colored envelope across the table. My name, written in Grandma Rose's elegant cursive. My hands trembled as I picked it up. There's one more thing, Mr. Henderson added, his voice dropping. Your grandmother also left detailed documentation, journals, financial records, photographs. She told me that if anyone contested the will, these documents should be made available to you. She said they would explain everything. Explain what? I whispered. Why did she make the choices she did? And why Jessica's father, your Uncle Richard, was completely excluded from her will, despite being her only living child. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Uncle Richard hadn't even shown up today, claiming business obligations in Seattle. I'd thought it strange but not suspicious. Now, I wasn't so sure. Jessica doesn't know this yet, Mr. Henderson continued. But her father borrowed over $400,000 from your grandmother over the years. Money that was never repaid. Money that he claimed was for investments that never materialized. Your grandmother documented every penny. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. These weren't just family drama stories, this was something deeper. A pattern of betrayal that had been building for decades. As I left the law office that afternoon, Grandma Rose's letter burning in my purse. I had no idea that Jessica's threat wasn't empty. I didn't know that she'd already set plans in motion, or that the revenge stories I'd heard about families tearing each other apart over money would pale in comparison to what was coming. The war for my inheritance had just begun, and my cousin had no idea that Grandma Rose had been preparing me for this battle all along. 3 days after the will reading, I moved back into Grandma Rose's house, my house now, though it still felt strange to think of it that way. The Victorian on Maple Drive held 40 years of memories, scraped knees healed in the kitchen, Christmas mornings by the fireplace, late-night conversations about life and love and loss. Every room whispered stories of the woman who'd saved me when I had nothing. I was unpacking boxes in the master bedroom when my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text, all from relatives I barely knew, aunts, uncles, distant cousins I'd met maybe twice at weddings or funerals. The messages ranged from disappointed to hostile, but they all said essentially the same thing: I'd stolen Jessica's inheritance, manipulated a dying woman, driven a wedge into the family. You should be ashamed, Aunt Margaret wrote. Rose would be disgusted by your greed. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. These same relatives had ignored Grandma Rose for years, skipping birthdays and holidays, never visiting when she'd had her hip surgery or when she'd been hospitalized with pneumonia. But now, suddenly, they were all defenders of family values, warriors in Jessica's crusade for what she called justice. This was the kind of family revenge that happened slowly, through whispered conversations and social media posts, through reputation destruction that was harder to fight than any lawsuit. The tales of revenge I'd read online always made it seem dramatic and quick. Real life was messier, crueler, and more calculated. I was reading through the hateful messages when my best friend Malik called. Emma, you need to see this. See what? Jessica's Facebook page. She's gone nuclear. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and navigated to her profile. What I saw made my blood run cold. Jessica had posted a long, emotional statement about elder abuse, about how I'd isolated Grandma Rose from her family, about how she suspected I'd even withheld medical care to speed up her death. The post had already been shared 200 times, with comments ranging from sympathetic to outright vicious. This is insane, I breathed. None of this is true. Grandma Rose had round-the-clock care in her final weeks. I can prove all of this. I know that, Malik said gently, but Jessica's telling a good story, and people love a villain. You need to fight back, Emma. This isn't going to stop on its own. But I didn't know how to fight a war waged on social media and in the court of public opinion. I was a 28-year-old graphic designer who worked from home and preferred books to parties. Jessica, meanwhile, was a professional socialite with a network of wealthy friends and a husband who owned 3 car dealerships across the state. She knew how to manipulate narratives and position herself as the victim in every situation. The next morning, I received a certified letter from Bradley & Sons, one of the most expensive law firms in the city. Jessica was contesting the will, claiming undue influence and questioning Grandma Rose's mental competency. The letter detailed their intention to depose me, to subpoena medical records, to interview everyone who'd had contact with my grandmother in her final years. I sat at the kitchen table where Grandma Rose and I had shared countless meals, and for the first time since her death, I allowed myself to cry, not just for her loss, but for the family drama that was consuming what should have been a time of mourning. Jessica wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance, she was trying to destroy my reputation, my relationships, my entire life. That's when I remembered the letter. I'd been avoiding it, treating it like Pandora's box, but Grandma Rose had left it for me for a reason. And if Mr. Henderson was right about the documentation she'd left behind, maybe I wasn't as defenseless as I felt. The envelope opened with a whisper. Inside was a single page in my grandmother's handwriting, dated just 3 weeks before her death. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then Jessica has shown her true colors, just as I knew she would. I'm sorry you have to face this alone, but you're stronger than you know. You're a survivor, just like me. What I'm about to tell you will hurt, but you need to know the truth. These aren't just stories I'm sharing. This is the real history of our family. The drama that's been hidden for decades. Jessica's father, your Uncle Richard, has been stealing from me for 20 years. He forged my signature on checks, took out credit cards in my name, and convinced me to invest in his business ventures, knowing they would fail. He took nearly $500,000, Emma. $500,000. Jessica knows. She's known for at least 5 years. Ever since she accidentally saw financial documents her father left in their vacation home. Instead of coming to me, instead of helping me, she started planning. She and Richard have been positioning themselves for this day, preparing to contest my will and claim I was senile, unable to manage my own affairs. I've documented everything: bank statements, recordings of conversations, and emails between Richard and his business partners discussing how to milk the old lady for more money. It's all in my safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is in my jewelry box, hidden in the lining. Use this information wisely. Emma. Not for revenge, I don't believe in that, but for protection. For justice. These family revenge stories always have two sides, and you deserve to know yours. I chose you because you were there. Not for the money, not for what you could get from me, but because you genuinely cared. You saw me as a person, not an ATM. That kind of love is the real inheritance. Sweetheart, fight for what's right, but don't let this consume you. Don't become like them in your pursuit of justice. Be better. Be the woman I know you are. All my love, Grandma Rose. I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling worse with each pass. The pieces were falling into place: Uncle Richard's mysterious absences, the arguments I'd overheard between him and Grandma Rose, the way Jessica had suddenly started visiting more frequently about 5 years ago, always asking pointed questions about Grandma's finances and health. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about a decades-long pattern of theft and manipulation. A final revenge scenario where the victim had outplayed her abusers from beyond the grave. Grandma Rose had set a trap, and Jessica had walked right into it. I found the key exactly where Grandma said it would be, hidden in the satin lining of her rosewood jewelry box. As I held it in my palm, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the helpless victim in this story anymore. I had weapons, knowledge, and proof. Jessica wanted a war. She was about to get one, but this would be a battle fought with truth, not lies, a fallen revenge, where her own greed would be her downfall. I called Mr. Henderson. I need to see everything, I told him. Every document, every recording, everything Grandma Rose left, and I need to know exactly how we use this to end this. I was hoping you'd say that, he replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring coffee, we're going to be there for a while. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in Grandma Rose's antique mirror. I looked different, somehow older, harder, ready. The revenge stories I'd grown up hearing always made the protagonist seem superhuman, fearless. I was terrified, but I was also determined. Jessica had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed I was weak, that I'd roll over and let her bully me into submission. She'd underestimated the woman who raised me, and now she was about to learn why that was a fatal error. The real drama was just beginning, and this time, the truth would be the ultimate weapon. The safety deposit box at First National Bank was larger than I expected, stuffed with manila folders that represented decades of careful documentation. Mr. Henderson and I spread the contents across his conference table, and what emerged was a portrait of systematic financial abuse that made me physically sick. Your grandmother was meticulous, Mr. Henderson said, pointing to a spreadsheet that detailed every suspicious transaction. She started documenting everything after she found the first forged check in 2003. That's 22 years of evidence. Emma, this isn't just a family drama, this is criminal fraud. I picked up a folder labeled 2018 to 2019 and found bank statements highlighted in yellow, showing withdrawals of $15,000, $22,000, $8.5, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic reporting. Attached were copies of checks made out to RM Investment Holdings, signed with a version of Grandma Rose's signature that was close but not quite right. I'd seen her handwriting my entire life. These were forgeries. How did she get these? I asked. She hired a private investigator in 2017, Mr. Henderson explained. After your uncle's third investment opportunity failed, she got suspicious. The PI documented everything: the shell companies, the fake business partners, the money laundering. Your grandmother wasn't senile, Emma. She was building a case. But the most damning evidence was a series of audio recordings, neatly labeled and dated. Mr. Henderson played the first one, and my uncle's voice filled the room, unmistakable in its casual cruelty. "She's got at least 3 million, probably more," Uncle Richard said. "The old bat's too proud to spend it. When she dies, we split it 50-50. Emma gets the house and some jewelry to keep her happy." A woman's voice, I didn't recognize it. Probably one of his business associates, responded. "What if she leaves everything to the kid?" I heard their close. Uncle Richard laughed. "Then we can test. Get some doctors to testify she was losing it. Hell, we've been documenting her forgetfulness for 2 years now. I've got emails from Jessica listing every time Mom repeated herself or forgot a name. A halfway decent lawyer could spin that into dementia." My stomach turned. The revenge story I was living through had depths I hadn't imagined. They'd been planning this for years, systematically creating a narrative of decline that didn't exist. Every visit Jessica made, every concerned phone call, every inquiry about Grandma Rose's health, it was all part of a long game designed to steal everything she'd worked for. "There's more," Mr. Henderson said grimly, handing me a thick folder labeled Jessica College Years. Inside were tuition statements from USC, where Jessica had supposedly attended on scholarship, except she hadn't. Grandma Rose had paid every penny of her $200,000 education. Money that Uncle Richard had claimed was a loan he'd paid back. There were also receipts for Jessica's wedding's $75,000 for a ceremony at the Ritz-Carlton. Every cent paid by my grandmother. A down payment on Jessica's first house. $100,000. A business investment in Jessica's husband's dealership. $150,000. The pattern was crystal clear. Grandma Rose had given Jessica opportunities, support, and genuine love. And in return, Jessica had seen only a resource to be exploited, a final revenge scenario waiting to be written with her as the hero and me as the villain. "Why didn't she ever say anything?" I whispered. "Why didn't she cut them off years ago?" Mr. Henderson's expression softened. "She told me once that she kept hoping they'd change, that Richard would become the son she'd raised, that Jessica would develop a conscience. She didn't want to believe her own family could be this cruel. But about a year ago, something shifted. She realized they never would change, and she decided to act." He pulled out a final document. This one more recent, a video file labeled "Final Statement for Legal Purposes Only." Mr. Henderson played it, and Grandma Rose appeared on screen, sitting in this very office, looking frailer than I remembered, but sharp as ever. "My name is Rose Eleanor Mitchell," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I'm 82 years old, and I'm of completely sound mind, as my doctors and this attorney can attest. I'm recording this because I know my son Richard and my granddaughter Jessica will attempt to claim otherwise after my death." She went on for 15 minutes, methodically detailing her mental competency, her awareness of her financial situation, and her very deliberate decision to leave the bulk of her estate to me. She listed reasons: my caregiving, my genuine affection, and my presence during her illness. But she also listed their sins: the theft, the manipulation, the way they'd viewed her final years as nothing more than a waiting period before they could claim their prize. "Emma earned this inheritance through love," Grandma Rose said, looking directly into the camera. "Jessica and Richard earned their exclusion through greed. If they contest this, Mr. Henderson has my permission to release all documentation to the authorities. Let them explain their actions to a jury if they're so certain they deserve more." The video ended, and I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't just evidence, it was a flex revenge masterpiece. A strategic demolition of every argument Jessica could make. Grandma Rose had outplayed them from the beginning, turning their own schemes into weapons against them. "So, what do we do?" I asked. Mr. Henderson smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. "We give them a choice. Jessica's lawyer filed the contest yesterday, requesting mediation before the trial. We'll attend that mediation, and we'll present a summary of this evidence. We'll explain that if they withdraw the contest, this stays private. But if they proceed, every document, every recording, every shred of evidence goes to the district attorney's office and becomes public record." "That's blackmail, isn't it?" "No," he said firmly. "Blackmail would be threatening to expose crimes they committed in exchange for money. This is simply informing them of the legal consequences of their actions. Your grandmothers will be legitimate. They have no case, and pursuing this fraudulent contest while knowing the truth constitutes fraud itself. We're offering them an out they don't deserve." The mediation was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. Mr. Henderson spent those days preparing a presentation that was, in his words, prosecutorial in nature. We organized the evidence chronologically. creating a timeline of theft that spanned 2 decades. We prepared copies of the most damaging documents, including the audio recordings and Grandma Rose's video testimony. Jessica didn't know what was coming. She'd assumed I was a soft target, someone who could be bullied into a settlement. These family drama stories always featured an underdog, and she'd miscalculated who that was. On Thursday night, unable to sleep, I walked through the house room by room, remembering, this was what Jessica was trying to take from me, not just money, but memories, history, the physical space where my grandmother's love still echoed, every photograph on the wall, every piece of furniture, every scratch in the hardwood floor told stories of a life well lived. I found myself in Grandma Rose's bedroom. Sitting on the edge of her bed, her reading glasses were still on the nightstand, next to a mystery novel she'd never finish. I picked them up, feeling the weight of them, and something broke open inside me. I won't let them win, I whispered to the empty room. I promise. The next morning, I dressed in the navy suit Grandma Rose had bought me for job interviews, professional, serious, unbreakable. When I looked in the mirror, I saw her in my expression, the same determined set to the jaw, the same steel in the eyes. The revenge stories had shaped me more than I realized. I was ready for war. At 10 a.m. I walked into Henderson and Associates' largest conference room to find Jessica, Uncle Richard, and 2 expensive-looking lawyers already seated. Jessica's makeup was perfect, her outfit designed, her expression one of wounded innocence. She was playing her role to perfection, the wronged granddaughter seeking justice. Mr. Henderson set a banker's box on the table with a heavy thud. Before we begin, he said, I think you should know what we have. The look on Jessica's face when she realized what was coming would stay with me forever. This was the moment the story shifted, the ivory revenge, where truth became the sword that cut through all the lies, and I was done being the victim. The conference room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Mr. Henderson opened the first folder. Jessica's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Diane Crawford, leaned forward with professional skepticism that wouldn't last much longer. Uncle Richard sat slouched in his chair, trying to project boredom, but I saw his eyes tracking every movement of the documents. Let's start with 2003. Mr. Henderson began, his voice calm and methodical. March 15th. A check for $18,500 made out to RM Investment Holdings, signed by Rose Mitchell. Except Rose didn't sign this check. She didn't even know about it until her accountant flagged it during tax preparation. He slid a photocopy across the table. Diane picked it up, her expression still neutral, but I saw her eyes narrow as she examined the signature. Over the next 22 years, Mr. Henderson continued, Richard Mitchell forged his mother's signature 47 times, stealing approximately $463,000. We have handwriting analysis from 3 independent experts confirming the forgeries. This is ridiculous, Uncle Richard sputtered, finally sitting up straight. Those were loans. Investments. My mother knew about all of them. Mr. Henderson pressed play on his laptop. Uncle Richard's voice filled the room. She's got at least $3 million, probably more. The old bat's too proud to spend it. When she dies, we split it 50-50. The color drained from Jessica's face. She shot her father a look of pure horror, but he was staring at the laptop like it was a bomb about to explode. This was the moment in every revenge story where the villain realizes they've been caught, where all their carefully constructed lies start to crumble. That's out of context, Uncle Richard said weakly. You can't. There are 14 hours of recordings. Mr. Henderson interrupted. Your mother was very thorough. Should we listen to the one where you discuss fabricating evidence of her dementia? Or perhaps the one where you and Jessica calculate how much she's worth dead versus alive? Diane Crawford closed her folder with a sharp snap. I need to speak with my clients. Privately. Now, of course, Mr. Henderson said pleasantly. Take all the time you need. We have additional evidence to organize anyway. They huddled in the corner, voices rising and falling in heated whispers. I watched Jessica's face cycle through emotions, shock, anger, fear, and finally, calculation. Even now, caught red-handed, she was looking for an angle, a way to spin this in her favor. But there was no spin for this. No story that could explain away theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The family revenge tale had reached its climax, and for once, justice was on the side of truth. When they returned to the table, Diane looked like she'd aged 10 years. My clients would like to know what you're proposing. Mr. Henderson didn't smile, but satisfaction radiated from him. Withdraw the will contest. Sign a document acknowledging that Rose Mitchell was of sound mind and that her will reflects her genuine wishes. In exchange, this evidence remains private. Emma keeps what her grandmother left her, and we all move forward. And if we don't agree, Jessica asked, her voice tight, then every document, every recording, every photograph goes to the district attorney. Mr. Henderson replied, wire fraud, forgery, theft, conspiracy, these are federal crimes. Ms. Hartley, your father is looking at 10 to 15 years in prison, and since you knowingly participated in planning the will contest while aware of his crimes, you could face charges as an accessory. The tales of revenge I'd heard growing up always made this moment seem triumphant, cathartic. Instead, I felt hollow. These were my family members, people I'd shared Thanksgiving dinners with, people whose baby pictures hung alongside mine in old photo albums. The drama of inheritance had turned us into enemies. But we'd started as something else, something that should have mattered more than money. You're bluffing, Uncle Richard said, but his voice shook. You won't actually prosecute. The scandal would hurt Emma too. Try me, I said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to me. You stole from her? For 20 years, you stole from a woman who gave you everything. And you, Jessica, I looked at my cousin, and maybe she saw something in my face that scared her, because she flinched. Grandma Rose paid for your education, your wedding, and your house. She loved you. And you repaid her by treating her death like a payday. Emma, you don't understand, Jessica started. I understand perfectly. You thought I was weak. You thought you could bully me into giving up what Grandma Rose wanted me to have. This isn't about money for Mitts, about honoring her wishes. But for you, it was always just about the inheritance. The silence that followed was absolute. Diane whispered something to Jessica, who shook her head violently. More whispers. Uncle Richard slumped in his chair, defeated. We need 24 hours, Diane finally said. You have to, Mr. Henderson replied. This is a one-time offer. In 2 hours, either you sign the withdrawal, or I walk these documents across the street to the DA's office myself. They left without another word, Jessica's designer heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor, Uncle Richard shuffling behind her like a man walking to his execution. This was the final revenge, not violence or dramatic confrontation, but the cold, brutal exposure of truth. Mr. Henderson and I sat in the conference room, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal, and I felt something release inside me. The weight I'd been carrying since Grandma Rose's death, the fear and uncertainty and grief, it began to lift. She knew, I said quietly. All those years, she knew what they were doing, and she never said anything to me. She was protecting you, Mr. Henderson replied. Rose told me once that you'd been through enough pain in your life. She didn't want to burden you with this until it was necessary. She hoped they'd prove her wrong, right up until the end. But when they didn't, she made sure you'd have what you needed to fight back. 90 minutes later, Diane Crawford returned alone, carrying a signed document. Jessica and Uncle Richard had withdrawn from the contest. They acknowledged Grandma Rose's mental competency. They agreed to have no further contact with me and waived any right to contest the will's execution. My clients will not be making any public statements, Diane said stiffly. They expect the same courtesy. The evidence remains sealed, Mr. Henderson agreed, unless, of course, they violate the terms of this agreement. After she left, I sat in the conference room holding the document. Proof that I'd won, that Grandma Rose's wishes would be honored. The revenge stories always ended here, with the hero triumphant and the villains vanquished. But real life wasn't that simple. That night, I sat in Grandma Rose's garden, my garden now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The roses she'd planted were beginning to bloom, their fragrance heavy in the spring air. This was what I'd fought for. Not the money, but this space, these memories, this physical connection to the woman who'd saved me. My phone buzzed with a text from Malik. Did you win? I typed back. I survived, because that's what this story was really about. Not revenge, not dramatic courtroom confrontations, but survival. The survival of truth in a world that often rewards lies. The survival of love when betrayed by blood. The survival of one woman's legacy despite the family members who tried to destroy it. Over the following weeks, I learned that Jessica and her husband had moved to Arizona, fleeing the whispers and rumors that somehow leaked despite the confidentiality agreement. Uncle Richard declared bankruptcy and was living in a studio apartment in the bad part of town. The family drama had imploded their lives just as they'd tried to implode mine. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I felt tired. The fallen revenge had consumed months of my life, energy I could have spent grieving properly, celebrating Grandma Rose's life instead of defending her final wishes. But there were moments of grace, too. I used part of the inheritance to establish the Rose Mitchell Scholarship at the local community college, helping students who'd lost their parents pursue education. Grandma Rose would have loved that, turning pain into something useful, something that helped others write their own stories of survival. I kept the house, of course, every room a reminder of the woman who'd shown me what real family meant. Not DNA or obligation, but choice. Love given freely, without expectation of return. That was the real inheritance she'd left me, worth more than any bank account. 6 months after the will reading, I was in the kitchen making her peach cobbler recipe when I found another envelope tucked into her old cookbook. My name on the front, her handwriting unmistakable. Emma, if you're reading this, then my plans worked, and you're safe. I'm sorry I had to burden you with the ugliness of what Richard and Jessica became. I kept hoping they'd change, but some people are too far gone. Don't let this make you bitter, sweetheart. Don't let their betrayal convince you that people aren't worth trusting. Yes, blood can disappoint you, but chosen family, the people who show up and stay because they want to, not because they have to, that's real. That's the flex revenge against cynicism. Refusing to let cruelty harden your heart. Live well, love deeply, plant roses, and watch them grow. That's how you honor me, not by winning wars, but by refusing to become a warrior. I love you always. Grandma Rose. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, her words settling into my bones like a benediction. The Ivory revenge wasn't about destroying Jessica and Uncle Richard. It was about building something beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal. That night, I called Malik and invited him over for cobbler. We sat in the garden, talking and laughing, and I felt Grandma Rose's presence in every breeze, every bloom, every moment of joy I allowed myself despite everything. The revenge stories people love to hear always end with dramatic justice, with villains punished and heroes victorious. My story ended quietly, simpler. I kept what was mine. I honored those I loved, and I refused to let their greed poison my capacity for grace. Jessica tried to steal my inheritance, thinking she could manipulate grief and gaslight truth. She didn't expect that Grandma Rose had spent years preparing for exactly that betrayal. She didn't expect that love could be strategic, that kindness could come with teeth, that the quiet girl she'd dismissed as weak would fight back with the most powerful weapon of all. The truth in the end, this wasn't their story. It was mine, and Grandma Rose's. A tale of how real family, the kind you choose, the kind that chooses you back, survives every attempt to destroy it. The roses bloomed that spring, just like she promised they would, and I was there to see it, standing in my grandmother's garden, in my grandmother's house, living the life she'd fought so hard to give me. That was the real victory. That was the story worth telling.